Most people spend their entire lives performing a version of themselves they think other people want to see. Stephanie Paul never got that memo. From the time she was giving relationship advice at 13 to the moment she told a room full of executives their $50 million pitch was going to fail, she's always led with radical honesty. In this conversation, we get into where that kind of unshakable self-trust comes from, why it terrifies people before it transforms them, and what it actually looks like to teach others to stop hiding and start connecting. I'm Jonathan Domsky. This is the Pattern-Seeking Entrepreneur. Let's go. Some entrepreneurs succeed by following the playbook, and some succeed by writing their own. This show is for the second kind. Welcome to the Pattern-Seeking Entrepreneur, conversations with intense, analytical founders who have built something significant and are now redesigning the architecture of how they lead, build, and operate so that their strengths create leverage instead of friction. I'm your host, Jonathan Domsky, business and life coach, entrepreneur, and someone who has spent a career helping powerful minds build businesses that actually fit how they think. Let's get started. Stephanie, let's hear your story. When did you first realize that you think differently than most people in the room?
I was probably a teenager where I first discovered that things were a little bit different, and then probably really understanding it closer sort of into my late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah. And what did you notice?
People kept telling me, I've never met anybody like you before.
What do you think they meant? What do you think they meant?
I was often told you think very differently from other people. I never really had a clique. I didn't have a group or a set of people that I hung out with or a way that I thought.
Yeah.
I was never sort of zealot in my way of thinking. I never stuck to any one sort of road or, I always explored. If somebody said to me, oh, that person's this way and you should feel this way towards them, I'm like, well, that's your relationship with them. Mine could be very different. So, it was just different.
When people would tell you, Stephanie, I've never been anyone like you before, did it feel like a compliment? Did it feel like something was wrong with you? What did you feel inside when you heard that?
It made me super curious. It made me kind of, I really didn't care whether people liked me or didn't like me or peer. I remember very distinctly at the age of 17 going, peer pressure, I don't really give a damn what everybody else is doing. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it my way and I'm going to figure it out or whatever that was. So when people said that to me, it was more of a case of, wow, why? What do you see that I don't understand? Like, I honestly, when I was younger, thought everybody was like me. I was just like, well, everybody thinks like this. Or doesn't everybody do this? And people just be like, no.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody does as a small child. We have to learn that we think differently than other people. But quite unusual as a 17-year-old girl to feel a mere curiosity about social pressure. So tell me about your genius. What are the things that you seemingly just effortlessly do better than most of the people that you know?
They effortlessly bring joy to any situation. I've been in situations where friends have been going through really difficult things, and I'm originally from New Zealand. I can tell you one particular time where a friend of mine went home because her father was very sick and she was potentially going to have to give him one of her kidneys. And when she came back to America, she was like, oh my God, we sat on my balcony and we shared some stories and some times, and she was laughing and laughing and laughing. And she was just like, I couldn't wait to get home and be with you because I knew the way you would look at what I was dealing with wasn't going to be like everybody else. I knew you were going to lift the feeling and the energy. And then people would say those kind of things to me all the time. I remember being in a mastermind with, entrepreneurs and CEOs and peers and stuff. One of my friends in the group, her brother had just passed away 2 weeks prior to our meeting, and we'd go around and we'd say a number, how we felt. Like I'm a 1 to 10, 1 being on death's door, 10 being amazing. And she's like, I think I'd be a 5, but because Stephanie's in the room, I'm a 7.5. And I was like, what does that mean? And so it began a journey of trying to understand what that meant for other people. And I guess I just had to accept that that's what I do for other people.
So certainly humor and fun, but I'm also hearing when you share that is connection. You just have a real genius for connecting with people, for helping them feel seen and heard, and to not just seen and heard by you, but to for that to help them connect and express themselves with other people. That's actually kind of what you do for a living now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's teaching people how to be safe so that they can be themselves.
Yeah. And it starts with that rooted connection, and part of your vehicle for that is the fun, the humor that you bring to a room. Stephanie, do you have any special interests, things that you just love and know more about than just about anyone that you know?
I don't know if I don't want to say I know more about than anybody I know because there's lots of people I know who are smarter than me. But things that I love,
Yeah.
I've been learning Qigong for the last 12 months and I love that. I'm really
Mm.
enjoying that. It's super interesting what shows up in the world since I've been working on that and practicing that. I'm really enjoying learning new healing modalities because I believe it's something that I've always had. It's like it's a collective thing that's been around me, and now I'm learning how to master them and use them
Yeah.
and be effective with them. I love neuroscience. I love understanding how our brain and our biology works. And I love connecting the things that people say work but don't understand with the science that's caught up with everything else right now. So I'm a pig in muck, you could say, when it comes to that kind of stuff. I will wallow in it all day long.
Fantastic. Tell me about your business. What do you do? Who do you serve? What are the problems that you solve?
Well, I believe it's interesting you say this because when I started my business 14 years ago, my business coach said, "What do you want to specialize in?" And I said, "I want to be a connection coach." And he said, "I don't know what that means, and no one else will. So, choose something else." And he kind of talked me into choosing a speaking coach. And it's not
Mm.
really what I do, it's an aspect of it, yes. Communication and speaking is an aspect of it, but it's deeper than that because in leadership, you have to start with self first. And if you don't understand yourself and you can't truly connect to yourself and you don't understand what your own triggers are and your own behaviors are and your own way of showing up and what your values are, you can't really lead others through those types of things. And whether you know them or not, your values depict your behavior, your values depict the way you show up, and your values depict what you choose to do in life. And if those things are congruent, then leadership is a lot easier.
Yeah.
But most people kind of walk through life and don't really look internally,
Wow.
and that internal journey is just as important as walking through life as anything else, especially in leadership.
So I'm curious if you could go back 14 years ago and you
Mm.
would just finish the call with your business coach, and he's like, cut out this connection coach nonsense. No one knows what you're talking about. Focus on being a speaking coach. What do you think you would have told yourself?
I was annoyed. I was really annoyed that that was possibly the way the world was going to look at things. And I didn't change the way I approached stuff because he thought that that was not necessarily what I should call myself, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Eventually it led me to developing the U method, and the U method is all based in metrics and science was what we start with, but essentially teaching people how to truly connect to themselves, because if you can't connect to yourself, you can't connect to others. And so I've almost done a full circle. I'm going back to the same language I started my business with,
Yeah.
because now it's the buzz thing. Now it's all about neuroscience. Well, I was talking about neuroscience and storytelling and communication like 12, 10 years ago, and now it's like a big buzz thing and everybody's discussing it because the science has caught up. But I was digging through those weeds a long time ago because I started working with PhDs and was teaching them essentially techniques of humor and stand up and speaking and acting and storytelling and voice and blah, 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 and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
PhDs want to understand the science and the metrics and the data. So I had to figure that out. Uh, so, yeah, I guess the answer to your question is it bothered me, and I just continued on the road without necessarily the labels, I suppose you could say.
Yeah. There's a through line in a few of the stories that you've been sharing. From when you were 17, and you're like, I don't care what people think. And starting your business, and your business coach is like, don't do that. Like, I don't care what that guy thinks. Like, and even, when I asked you about your genius or things that you just know more about than other people, and you said, well, I know a lot of really smart people, and you're surrounding yourself with PhDs and all these people who are awfully smart. Where do you think this self-confidence comes from?
I don't know. I've always kind of had it. Uh, From a little kid, one would say I was precocious, maybe because I had the self-confidence and I could have very adult conversations at a really young age.
Yeah.
When you're a believer in previous souls or old souls or whatever you want to call it, but I came out of the womb having these conversations, and I'll never forget some of the stories that adults told me when I got a little bit older about what I did or what I said when I was younger, like 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
Um, I remember my mother, I used to go to work with my mother in the school holidays or, because she would keep me out of trouble. She would pay me $5 a day to go to work with her so that I wouldn't get into trouble outside of school.
Yeah.
And I had lunch with one of her coworkers and he had problems with his girlfriend. Now, I was about 12 or 13 at the time. And I gave him relationship advice. And he said to my mother, that was the scariest conversation I think I've ever had. And my mother said to him, why? And he goes, your daughter gave me the best relationship advice I've ever had. Like it was like I was talking to a therapist. I mean,
And
I don't know. I just thought that maybe it was common sense to me.
I've always thought of myself as having had an excess of confidence. I say that the only thing that I'm truly naturally good at is learning. And like there's very few things I'll try right out of the box and like, oh, I'm just a natural at that. But I just always have the confidence, yeah, I could figure that out.
Hmm.
And often that served me. And then I figured stuff out. Often it's been a real harm that I've felt myself stuck in situations where I was sometimes suffering for years because I just had this excess of confidence. Like, yeah, I could figure that out. I'm curious, how do you feel that your abundance of confidence has served you, and where has it maybe caused you in trouble or helped you stay in trouble a lot longer than you should have been because you just thought you could figure it out?
I think, which side of it should I answer first? And it's a big, deep question. Who When I started my business, I thought I could do everything myself. And I probably stayed a little bit too long in that mode before I got assistance. But I was also taught by a mentor that if you want to be in leadership, you need to understand everybody's roles. So I think part of
Mm.
it is I wanted to teach myself everybody's roles, like marketing and social media and the types of things that, I might be using for my business. And I probably stayed too long in the weeds of that, and should have got out of it faster and trusted people more and learned how to hire well
Yeah,
earlier. Um, and getting myself into trouble, I think, with my confidence is I'm very transparent and I'm very direct in my style of communication. My disc is right behind me if you know anything about disc. So I think learning the art of subtlety, instead of direct of how I'm thinking or what I'm thinking,
yeah,
and not realizing that it could hurt somebody's feelings, not meaning to, in any way, shape, or form, just trying to be honest.
yeah,
I remember walking up to a friend of mine in a bar one day when I needed to buy a car, and I was about 22, and he was a car salesman. And I just walked up to him and said, "Hey, Ian, how's it going?" Like, and started talking to him about the car that I wanted to. And he's like, "Hey, Stephanie, nice to see you too. How's it going?" And he was trying to sort of walk it back into
yeah,
pleasantries. And I was like, "That's such a waste of time." You
yeah,
know, small talk is not necessarily a waste of time. And science is proving that it actually helps us engage each other. So it's
sure.
important.
Yeah, even if the content is trivial, it's sending a signal that like I want to be your friend. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is a safe space. So I see these two dominant strands of your personality, of the self-confidence and also just this deep curiosity. And you said that sometimes it's caused you to be to spend some of your time on things where maybe you shouldn't have, like figuring out marketing, figuring out admin, figuring out all these things. But at the same time, you've had such an interesting career. I mean, acting, comedy, directing, writing, coaching, speaking, producing, neuroscience research, board governance. Is there a thread tying all that together that wasn't visible to you when you were living it? Or is it just shiny object syndrome, running over here, running over there?
No, I think I'm genuinely interested in helping others develop and achieve their goals. When I see people develop and achieve a goal that they've set out to do, and I was a part of that, that is that's all I want. That's like the light bulb going off for me, like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like I promote my clients on social media when they get raises or they achieve something or whatever. Like I want the world to know that, hey, so-and-so achieved this. So many people in life, look at writing a book, for example. How many people say, oh, I want to write a book and never get around to it and don't actually do it? I mean, and you and I both know, like writing a book is a feat. It's got a lot to it. Just getting it published out there, and maybe no one will ever even read it, or maybe you sell like 10 copies and it's not a bestseller, who knows? But it's a goal and it's an achievement, and it's something that not a lot of people will do. No, the through line for me is helping others achieve their goals. You mentioned board membership. I've stepped down off boards. I got on the boards because I really wanted to help, and I realized that my values didn't align with the board. Or with organization. Very important to me that whatever I am doing, whoever I am helping, is that our values align, and I'm not just doing it for the sake of doing it, that we are on the same page.
Yeah, all these different careers are helping people achieve, using your creativity to help other people achieve. And whether it's, again, through writing or coaching or speaking or all these other things that you've done, these are just manifestations of the purpose. But the purpose stays constant throughout. Interesting. So Stephanie, you've been performing since you were 4 years old, is that right?
Yes, I started ballet at the age of 4. So yeah, there were little recitals. And then I was doing drama. I kept dancing for 14 years, or close, maybe a little bit longer than that, because I did 2 years of professional dance in a cabaret troupe. But I did everything but tap, so ballet, jazz, modern. I was a rhythmical gymnast, and then I coached that for a couple of years. I started drama classes at the age of 10. I was shooting commercials by the time I was 16. I started production work in my late teens, early 20s. And I've worked in 8 countries around the world in that capacity.
Yeah. So you have this deep curiosity about human nature, studying just human behavior in order to perform it on stage when you were younger. And now you're someone who teaches others how to use that knowledge of neuroscience and human behavior to act more effectively out in the world. What was the pivot? Was there a moment in time where you just looked at an audience or a client and thought, I'm more interested in what's happening in their brains than what's happening on the stage?
I think that may have been an organic transition for me, because my mother worked with people that had mental disability. When I was born, she went to work at a kindergarten or a creche, and she ran the creche for Auckland Teachers College. And then when I went to school, so that was 5 years. And then when I went to school, she started working with people of mental disability, physical, majority mental disability. And so I kind of grew up with that in the background. And then she got a type of counselor's or psychology degree when she was in her 50s. She went back to school. So I was kind of always around looking at that aspect of it, and I worked for her part-time for about 10 years. So I think by osmosis that what's behind what's going on has kind of been always in my background. So I don't think there was a definite moment where it switched. I think it was something that's just in my vernacular from a very young age to ask those questions, what's behind what's happening in front of me.
Stephanie, you worked with lots of different people, helping them communicate. I mean, TEDx speakers, those PhD biotech executives you were talking about, sales teams. You even worked with me, helping me speak authentically like myself in front of a group, and it was tremendous. And I'm so grateful for you for our time together when we were working together. On the surface, these different kinds of people seem very different. But what do we all have in common when we walk into a room and we open our mouths?
We all have a brain. And the way we biologically receive information, and that information goes, into through our sensors, and then into our spinal cord, and up through the first part of our brain, which is the reptilian, into the limbic system, and then the neocortex, and that goes back and forth before it makes a decision. That's what we have in common. If you understand the biology behind how emotions and feelings are created, and thought processes and limbic responses and fight or flight and things like that, if you understand how you receive a piece of information and how you respond to it, and how you can deregulate that response if it's something that's heightened, that's negative, to be able to deal with it, we're all essentially, it doesn't matter what color you are, what religion you are, it doesn't matter where that comes from. We're basically set up the same way to receive information and communicate. What differentiates us is how we're taught these behaviors and these cultural systems and communication from childhood. But the way we can use that set of skills in biology is the same.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about a little bit how just thinking differently has helped you find success in your business by just being able to disregard the advice that didn't serve you and just explore your curiosity in finding a business that works. How has thinking differently caused you frustration or held you back over the years?
Well, because I don't run with the crowd. I'm not a sheep per se, and I don't run with the crowd. And I might make waves, when it's status quo. And but that's not working. Why are you going down that road? It's not working. Or, I make people feel uncomfortable because I tell them that that's not going to work.
Yeah.
One of the first biotech companies that I worked with, actually is like the third one, I think, to raise money. I started with them. I said, okay, pitch me. And here I am in a room full of executives, all the C-suite guys. And they were going out there to raise like $50 million, sorry. And they pitched me. And I said, do you guys actually want to raise money, or do you guys just want to look like everybody else? And they were like, well, we want to raise money. And I said, well, you're not going to do it with this. Yes. I used it. And they were like, what? Literally the CEO like coughed on his drink. He was like, and I was like, no, I'm serious. I'm being really honest with you. Your presentation looks like everybody else's out there. There's nothing emotional about it. There's nothing connective about it. It's just data. It's just statistics. It's just finance. It's just whatever. But you're essentially wanting to change the world with a biotechnology. And I don't care. I'm literally sitting here and my biology does not care. You have not made me feel anything towards wanting to write you a check.
So someone comes to you, they worked really hard, on a killer presentation, and then you listen to it as an expert and you're like, that wasn't killer. That really fell flat. How do people respond? Are they like, finally I found someone who's going to tell me the truth and help me? Or they say like, oh, we didn't like her. We're not going to work with her.
I've had both sides of the coin, and it's totally fine. I've had technical people, CTOs go, this is complete BS. This is just fluff, la, 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 because it's not data and science. Well, it is science. There's science research behind it. But, and, not everybody is going to love you, and that's totally fine. I'm cool with that. I remember calling a VC one day and saying, look, the CEO is really into it. The CTO thinks I'm a bunch of bollocks. And she was like, well, just work with the CEO. Don't worry about the CTO. Kick him out of the meetings. I was like, okay, fine. So, we kicked him out of the meetings. I worked with that CEO. They raised money. I do remember like my third or fourth session with him. And I said to him, okay, let's put aside the presentation for a second. I need to ask you a question, and I want you to be completely honest with me. And he's like, what? And I said, what are you afraid of? You're terrified. You're absolutely terrified, and I need to know what it is because we need to work on this fear, or you're not going to be able to go out there and raise money. And he's like, how do you know? I'm like, I'm reading your behavior. It's coming out of every pore in your skin. Other people might not see it, but because I'm trained in this, I see it very clearly. And his response was, I don't know the science well enough. And I'm like, that's not your job. You're the CEO. Your job is to go out there and sell it. The CTO's job is to talk about the science and the technology and the da-da-da. And when people have questions, you refer to him. You're not supposed to know the science.
Yeah. My favorite thing when I find people who have imposter syndrome is to say there's a really simple cure. Just stop being an imposter and just admit what are you good at and what are you not good at, and surround yourself. You don't need to be a balanced human being. You need to have a balanced team. But so many people feel like they just need to be the experts in everything, and it really holds a lot of us back. So you're an expert in communication. What are you still figuring out around how you communicate and collaborate with others?
I think I'm still getting better at my intimate relationships. The deeper you are with somebody, the harder those relationships can be, because you remove the layers, and then everybody sort of knows you deeper and more, it's not on the surface anymore. It's like, people know how to push your buttons and know what your triggers are. One of the things that I do with my clients is I do a SWOT analysis, but it's like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and triggers. And it's not threats, it's triggers. What are your triggers?
Yeah.
You know, and I did it on myself and I realized, oh my gosh, these are the things that trigger me. And I literally gave my SWOT analysis to my partner and I said, you need to understand these are the things that I'm working on and not use them against me because
Yeah.
I'm working on them. You need to
Yeah.
support me in the work that I'm doing. And at first it was hard for him because it's easier to point out the problems and the issues than it
Yeah.
is to hold space for someone who's working through those problems and issues, right? So
Yeah. That's something interesting about triggers. Triggered by something, we're never really upset about the thing that triggered us. It's the deep wound that the trigger pokes at, and
mhm.
it's hard to it can be hard to get at that and heal that sometimes. What's something that people often misunderstand about you?
When I was younger, um, I used to get, wow, I thought you were a bitch when I first met you, but now I've got to know you. You're actually really cool. And I
Yeah.
think that was because I'm very direct in the
Mm,
transparent way I approach communication. So I had to learn to soften that and approach things slightly differently, more thoughtfully. But now that I'm older, I'm not 100% sure. I think I've got really a lot better at reading the room,
yeah.
approaching the room or the energy of the other person with something that's complementary versus, one might say that I'm an alpha female, but I'll walk into a room, I see the other alpha females, and I'm like, okay, I'll just like deflate here over here because I can't be bothered getting into it. You can take the stage, sweetheart. I'm all good. So
Yeah.
I think that comes with age. But so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I remember in 2009, I did my first 360 review, and I read the results, and I'm like, "That's not right." Like, people don't perceive me that way because that's not that's not my intention. And my coach who did it with me, he asked me one of the best coaching questions I've ever heard. It's like, how could you take responsibility for the way that other people perceive you? And I worked at it really hard for 6 months, and it's exactly what you were talking about. Just, oh, you're with another alpha female. Like, how do you take responsibility for how they're going to perceive you and modulate your behavior or whatever it is to actually get the outcome that you want from that exchange? It's such an important lesson, but it's not easy. At least it wasn't easy for me. Something I read your book, Unlock the Magic of Story, and you argue that story is biologically pre-wired into human brains.
Hmm?
And my question is, if that's true, if we're already built for story, why are there so many smart people who are so bad at telling theirs? Or even to resist the idea that they even have a story at all?
Okay. I have a theory, and so far I'm not letting go of this theory because nobody's been able to prove my theory wrong. So I would love to do research. So if there's anybody listening that wants to give me a grant, I will happily take a grant to do the research behind it. Um, I have a theory that from a young age, probably starting around 3 to 5, we get told stop telling stories, right? Because
Hmm.
stories become associated with lies. Children are very good storytellers. Well, I went into the garden and there was a pixie fairy and it came across and there was a huge whale and blah, blah, blah. But that's the imagination of a child. What a wonderful story. The other interesting thing about it is as people fall into diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's and as they become older, they start seeing visions and telling stories and things like that. One of the things that therapy around it says is like, don't say, no, you're not seeing that, mom. No, you're not seeing that, dad.
Hmm.
Say, oh, yes, I see it with you, because that's what their brain is seeing at the time. And the same with children, because your brain doesn't know the difference between fake and real. And I won't go down that rabbit hole with you, but, that's
Yeah.
why we can have imagination and we can have things like dreams and they can appear real to us. So I think at some point we get told stop telling stories because they get associated with lies. And then by the time we get to school, it's all about facts and data and science and math and so that creativity portion of us around storytelling gets taken out of us. Storytelling becomes, once upon a time there was a princess and a prince, and it becomes like this book thing.
Yeah.
um and we forget that the way we engage another person's brain is through that story. So we've been telling story long before we've had language. There's painting on cave walls about animals and hunting and things like that. So, the neocortex, which is where language, logic, and reason comes from, is only about 200,000 years old, but the limbic system and the reptilian system in our brain is a lot older than that. So we had to communicate in other ways. So we have over 4,000 human behaviors, and some of them are micro expressions. And if you learn to read those behavior is amazing, actually. If you learn to use behavior and read behavior really well and use your nonverbals, you can tell a story without even speaking.
So, Stephanie, I would like to ask you for some marital advice right now regarding stories. So when my wife is really stressed, I just see possibility, and I will rewrite the narrative that she's saying into something that is full of agency and possibility, and that's kind of awesome. And she'll tell me, like, she doesn't want me to tell a story, that it's like it's going to raise her hopes, it's going to dash it, and like she doesn't want any story at all. And what I tell her is, you already have a story. Just your story kind of sucks. Like your like your story's
Yeah.
it's so negative, and it's so stuck. And how do you help someone shift their story from one of just negativity and victimhood to one of agency and possibility?
That's a really, really deep question. So one of my taglines is, the most powerful story you'll ever tell is the one between your ears. Repetition is key. The more you tell yourself that story, the more you'll believe it, whether it's true or not. Our biology is built to run away from the saber-toothed tiger, but there are no saber-toothed tigers in your backyard.
Yeah.
So, just the other day, literally it was yesterday or the day before. No, it was the day before. I was walking the cat in the garden, and there was a baby rattlesnake about this big. Those of you, I don't know if this is a sound as well as whatever, you can't see it. It was about 6 to 8 inches long. And I looked it up later to figure out it was a rattlesnake because it had an interesting pointed tail. And I called my partner to come out and look at it, and him and his daughter came out, and they freaked out and ran back inside. I'm like, it's a baby. At this point, it's probably not even poisonous. It probably can't even pierce, like it was tiny. And I was more concerned about the cat, getting near it because what have you. But, they freaked out and ran inside. And I'm like sort of cool, calm, and collected because I knew the story was, this thing can't hurt me. It can't move fast enough to get me. But they freaked out and ran inside. So when it comes to your wife, it's asking questions to see if she can disengage from the story and have a different perspective. So it's about shifting her perspective in the story that she has. Not necessarily completely changing the entire story, but humans hold on. So the brain will hold on to something because it feels safe, whether it's true, not positive or negative, it doesn't matter. The brain holds on to it because it feels safe. So you can't just rip the story out of their head and just shift it to nothing, from, okay, now it's sunshine, now it's rain, now it's, you can't do that. You have to do it in increments. And the reason why therapy works, good therapy, because there's some bad therapists out there, is through questions, right? And curiosity. And, well, what if we shifted it this way a little bit and just a little bit that, in the same way that when people do New Year's resolutions, you can't do 50 new things and just change your life like that. You've got to change things in increments. So, what's that book, Tiny Little Habits, that we've both read by, is it, what the last name's Fogg, BJ Fogg, I think his name is.
Atomic Habits.
Yeah. So it's all done in increments. So my best advice with that story is to ask her small questions, not a lot of them, but just, and try and see if you can get her to have a different perspective on the story. A few,
What's your favorite perspective shifting question?
Well, it depends on the situation. Okay. Well, first of all, is it real? Asking the question, is it real? So there's some really amazing work, which I think you know of because we were both at the same GOT in 2022. They did Katie Byron's work, and one of her...
Byron Katie's work.
So one of her exercises is it true?
Yeah.
How do I know it's true? I don't know if you've gone through that, and you can go to her website and download the exercise.
It's true. Are you sure it's true?
Yeah.
What do you think or feel, or who are you when you believe?
And how, exactly. And then you switch.
And who would you be if you didn't believe?
And then you switch the perspective and you say, what would it be if it was a complete opposite perspective? I mean, that's a great exercise. But it's basically asking, is it real? Is it a perception or is it real?
Yeah.
And is it a yes or is it a no? And what if you were in this scenario? So I think that for me, those types of questions around the perception is trying to figure out, well, is the perception real? Is the way you feel about yourself or the way you feel about the situation, is it real? What if you switch the perspective of it?
Yeah.
And you looked at it from a different angle? What if you turned the corner and, the car wasn't stolen? The car was actually there and somebody left $100 bill on the window for you. Oh, it's not going to happen. Well, how do you know? A girlfriend of mine taught me that there are parking fairies and I always get parking. She taught me how to believe in it. And then now I always get rock star parking. And it's
Yeah.
just a perspective and a belief, right?
I wasn't expecting to go in this direction with this conversation, but I think it's a really interesting one. With relationships, there's two people, and when they share the same collective story, things really work. And when they start having different stories about the relationship, even if it's rooted in the same set of facts, that's when things sometimes tend to go tragically wrong. What do you know? What have you done around collective storytelling, whether it's for a company or for a couple or something like that?
Well, when it comes to collective storytelling, once again, I talked about this earlier, is it sort of comes down to values. This conversation came up in my Qigong class this past weekend. We've got members, we do stuff online, but then at the end, we all come together and have a full day workshop together. And, one of the things that I mentioned was, my partner and I, we often look at things very differently. We have very different things that we like to do. They're not always the same. And, I'm quite happy leaving him doing what he wants to do and I'll go off and do what I want to do. But the one thing that we actually have that is the same is our spiritual belief and our ultimate energetic goal and how we perceive our reality of what the world means to us. Some might call that religion, some might call that spirituality, but what that thing is that's bigger than us, right? So that in itself for us is the same. And I think that's our glue. That's what holds us together, is that we have a very similar perspective about that. In that aspect, we're very interested in the knowledge around those type of things that we believe and perceive to be real. We'll watch documentaries together. We'll read books on it together. We'll have big discussions about it. Philosophy discussions and theories and stuff. So that, I think, for me is a core value. It's almost like the cornerstone value is, what do you believe around the reality of life?
So when I hear your set of facts, that you just shared, it'd be easy to tell a story. We have nothing in common. Like we don't even like to do any of the same things. Like what are we doing here? And it would be just as easy to say, we share this deep curiosity about the world and we support each other to explore that curiosity. Then we come together and we share and we're just genuinely interested about what the other person's been up to. And that's really beautiful. And that's what I love about a relationship. What work have you done about with multiple people weaving those facts into a coherent story that they could all get behind and enjoy?
I've worked with some customer service teams or client success teams, I think they're called now, where we sort of get behind the concept of what the company does or what their product is. And, that's a very difficult position to be in because they're often the one that everybody's yelling at, screaming at when everything goes wrong. And I've worked a lot with biotech and technology companies. So, new technology and things like that doesn't always go right. So, they're essentially the conduit between the sales, the technology, and the client. And, just collectively, they have a message. I don't do the marketing and branding. That's all. And I also don't do the product development or any of that kind of stuff. So they have their content. And I work with them on really collectively getting that content and understanding how to deliver it and receive negative messages and then, transmute those negative messages into a positive delivery on to the other side because they're doing cross-function communication. And so essentially it comes down to emotional intelligence, right? When the fire is coming at you, is how do you take the fire in, take a deep breath, change it to cool, calm, collected waters, and then deliver it out the other side, and also be able to quench the fire that's coming towards you. And that is emotional intelligence. So there's a strong aspect of the storytelling that you have to receive information, reconfigure the information emotionally intelligently,
Yeah.
and then deliver the information in an emotionally intelligent way, and then check in and be curious and really listen to the response. It's really is a give and take, what's the word I'm
Yeah.
looking for? Practice is the word I'm
Yeah.
looking for.
Yeah. And a willingness of everybody who's part of the story to engage and to buy into it. Stephanie, what's something that drains you that you wish you could give up this new year?
Drains me.
Yeah.
People who have the same squeaky wheel story.
Yeah. People who are stuck and vocal about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that drains me. I often hear like a sort of a negative, oh, and I'm like, oh, what now? Is
Yeah.
my response.
Yeah.
Um, but I love the expression the ask hole. It's that person that you continue to help or guide or respond to or share time with, and they ask a lot of questions and they say that they want to change or they want to do, and it could be a friend, it could be a family relative, or it could be a client, and they just ask the same thing over and over again, and they do keep doing the same thing over and over again, and you're like, Einstein says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again expecting a different result.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, it's the ask hole. It's the ask hole people in the world that just suck the living life out of you because they don't do anything with that they say they want to do, and they just do the
Yeah.
same circle,
Yeah.
the hamster wheel.
What's an activity that nourishes you, energizes you, makes you feel fully alive?
Qigong for sure. Qigong, yoga, and I love going to the ocean. I actually love going to the ocean for long walks on the beach with my feet in the water and then doing qigong
Yeah.
at the beach. And yeah, that super energizes me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love just having my toes in the sand and the water. It's great.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite things to hear from people is their vision for the future. We're having this conversation June 1st, 2026. But if we were talking exactly 1 year from now, what would you have accomplished in the past year to make you say that you've just had a phenomenal year? Just you've crushed it in all aspects of life, your business, your relationships, your health, spirituality, meaning, friends. What would have made this such a spectacular year?
If I could help people really truly find their voice and be brave and have the courage to step into their voice and sit at the table and ask the questions they want to ask and not be afraid and be able to openly deal with people who do shoot them down in leadership or something like that. There's just so many people that I work with that say that they want to sit more at the table and they want to get involved and they want to understand how to talk to executive leadership. But that's across the board. That's not just people in the STEM field that I work with. I mean, it's people in all different kinds of aspects of life, all different levels of life, blue collar, white collar, it doesn't really matter what culture you're in, women in certain religions that are, oppressed, things like that, is just finding a way to connect to themselves and being able to step forward and live the life that they want to live, with the
Yeah.
strength and the courage.
Yeah. Anything else for yourself?
I think I'm on a good streak health wise. Last year sucked, but this year everything's going well that way.
Yeah.
Um yeah, no. I enjoy when other people are happy. I'm happy.
Yeah. Let me just read back to you what I heard. It's June 1st, 2027. And I declare the possibility, this isn't necessarily who you are right now, but it's the best version of your future self. I declare the possibility that I helped people truly find their voice, to be brave, to connect deeply with themselves, to have the courage to sit at the table and openly deal with people trying to shoot them down with grace and confidence across all backgrounds. And my body is a healthy foundation for everything I want to do.
That
What do you
sounds
think?
spot on to me.
Yeah. Is there anything you think's in the way? Anything stopping you from getting what you want?
I'll just move it. I'm like water, Jonathan. If I have
Yeah.
to be ice up, if I have to be steam, I'll steam up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I try. I mean, not, I mean, you just got to keep going. I just, I've had some really difficult spots, especially last year dealing with I went through a whole cancer experience. There were some days where it was just, oh, for the love of God, this is hard. This is so hard. But you just got to keep going. And at some point, my guess is that when you know your number is up, you kind of just sort of know. I think there's some kind of divine intuition that comes to you, unless of course you get hit by a train. But it's then of course you wouldn't be in front of a train. So, but
Yeah.
I just think you kind of know when your number's up, and I knew my number wasn't up. I knew I had to keep going, and there was an odd sensation around it that this was part of my journey. So, all good.
Yeah. Stephanie, let's switch roles for a bit. Why don't you be the question asker? I'll be the question answer. Is there anything that you'd like to ask me?
I don't know, Jonathan. We talk about so many things. What do you find most difficult about connecting with other people?
What do I find most difficult about connecting with other people? So I only know how to have one kind of conversation, and it's one that we're having right now, like deep one-on-one about things that matter. And I find groups stressful unless they're highly structured. And when I talk with someone, there's talk about communication. There's so many different ways to listen. And I don't just
Mm.
mean active listening or like looking for
Mhm.
something to say, but I listen for possibility. I listen for suffering. I listen for inconsistencies. And I find that those are the best way for the most fulfilling way, satisfying way for me to connect with people is when I could be in real presence with their
Mm.
suffering and we could share that together. I find the bruised
Mm.
parts of people beautiful. Or that they say something and I'll have just this idea of possibility of how it could be just so awesome. I find that really exciting. It's a really great way for me to connect with people. And those inconsistencies, like when you talked about body language, like when we told after that CEO, like, what are you afraid of? And he's like,
Mm.
what? Like, did I forget to wear my shirt or something? Like, how did I, like, how did you see that? And like, well, yeah, because like I asked you how you were, and you said living the dream, and it's obvious you're not living the dream. And like, I noticed that immediately, and I love having that conversation that bridges from this quickly from the superficial to the real and the authentic and the deep. And when someone's not willing to do that, I just find it painfully boring. Like it's
Mm.
I can't do it. I just like in small talk, if it's the lubricant that gets us there, fantastic. But if that's where we end up, like
Mm.
I can't do it, and I feel disconnected from people, and I think they feel it from me too.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, no, I get that. You mentioned something earlier, and it reminded me of a saying that I learned a long time ago. People connect to our messes, not our successes. People
Yeah,
don't connect to your accolades and your awards and all that kind of stuff. They connect when you
yeah,
say, I survived a car accident and
yeah,
I almost died. I went through breast cancer. My mother, I cared for the last 5 years of her life with really bad dementia, and it was just horrific. And
yeah.
I don't know how I survived. That's when people go, you know what? Me too.
Well, it's a tragedy that these things that you just mentioned are the things that most of us try to hide. They're the most interesting, relatable things about us.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we,
I had a client once who, she was trying to raise money for a nonprofit, and she wanted to talk about her stroke. And she was a young woman. And I said, no one in the audience is going to relate to the fact that you had a stroke at the age of 30. That is just very rare and very unusual. But I'll tell you what, I know you had childhood trauma, and every single person in that audience has had their own version of childhood trauma. And we can talk about that, not in the real depth, darkness of what you went through, but we can talk about it on a level that the audience will connect to, and there will be an energetic understanding and an engagement. But they're not going to get, and she refused. She just refused. And her, I'm going to be honest, her speech was flat. The audience didn't really get there with her because she was afraid, you know, to tell the truth. And her nonprofit was for a children's organization. And I was just like, that doesn't make sense to me. But people are afraid. People want to put on the facade. And here's the interesting thing. So let's go back to human behavior. Our limbic system does not understand language, logical reason. It reads our non-verbals. It reads our 4,000 human behaviors and our micro expressions really, really well, whether you want to admit that or not. So then we get that gut instinct or the mirror neurons connection. And it's our neocortex, that's the language and logic and reason, that says, oh, that's not what you're feeling. Well, BS, guess what? Your limbic system knows it really, really well. So when we lie to each other, even on a public stage, we know. The
Yeah.
audience knows. When we tell the truth, those situations like at a wedding or a funeral, when someone gets up and they haven't prepared their speech and they just get up and they tell a story and
Yeah.
everyone's laughing and crying and they're like, oh my God, that is Bob, that is Samantha. We know that story. We can connect to that. We've lived it too. That is when we connect, not the superficial, trying to look perfect, blah, blah, blah. It's
Yeah.
boring.
Stephanie, what do you wish that people listening to this conversation knew about you and your company?
I can change your life.
Okay.
No, it is kind of funny because I've had clients say to me, like, I don't know how to explain what you do to other people. You're kind of a unicorn. And, I've worked with branding and marketing people. So some people pigeonhole me as a speaking coach. Some people pigeonhole me as a leadership coach. Some people pigeonhole me in, behavior and all that kind of stuff. Like, people like to pigeonhole. But I have a very, very holistic approach to communication. And it comes down to human biology and how we communicate as human beings. So however you can wrap your head around that, I don't know. But it is essentially storytelling. Like I said, the most powerful story you'll ever tell is the one between your ears. And the way you communicate to yourself is essentially the way you communicate to others.
Well, unicorns are magic, Stephanie, and so are you. Is there anything else that you'd like to share? Any last words of wisdom?
I don't know about words of wisdom, but follow me on LinkedIn, reach out to me, say hello. I respond. I do. If it's not me, my assistant will respond. But and tell me to respond. But I don't know if I have any words of wisdom. My biggest words of wisdom is just stop being scared and be nice to one another. All the human behavior experts that I ever speak to, the FBI guys, whatever, I always ask them one question. And it's when people are behaving badly, where is that behavior coming from? And they always say the same thing. When people behave badly, they're either in pain or in fear. So if you can understand when somebody is behaving badly, whether they're losing their temper or they're
Self-protective.
crying,
Yeah.
or they're, misbehaving, whatever it is, they're either in pain or fear. And so if you can respond with empathy and compassion, take a deep breath and step forward with curiosity instead of just meeting them where they're at with anger and negative behavior, you might be able to break down a barrier and connect.
Yeah, you said you're this unicorn, you do all these different things. Are you a leadership coach? Are you a speech coach? I think at the end of the day, you help people connect with who they authentically are and
Mm-hmm.
then teach them, empower them, give them the courage and the skills to effectively communicate that on whatever stage they want, whether it's in a boardroom or uh, raising money or on the TED stage or anything else. How should people get in touch with you, learn about you, follow your work? You mentioned LinkedIn. Anywhere else?
Yeah, LinkedIn, I'm / Stephanie E. Paul. And I have a website, stephaniepaulinc.com, although that is going to get a facelift very soon. And, Instagram. I don't do a lot of social media. LinkedIn's the best way to follow me. I write a newsletter every 3 weeks and I release a newsletter telling everybody all about the latest communication stuff and research that I found out about. So I stay on the ball with all of that. And that's pretty much it.
Well, Stephanie, Paul, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your heart, your story. I don't know the neuroscience behind it, but I like you, Stephanie. I like you a lot.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that. And it's reciprocal.
Thanks for listening to The Pattern Seeking Entrepreneur. If today's conversation resonated, especially if you are a founder who has built something meaningful, but senses that the structure around you no longer fully fits how your mind works, I would love to hear from you. at untangled-coaching.com. Don't forget the dash. If this episode was valuable, the best thing you could do is to share it with one founder who needs to hear this message. That's how the show grows, one person at a time. Until next time, may your work ahead fit you better than anything you've ever built before. And if today's conversation felt like it was speaking directly to you, it probably was. I'd love for you to reach out.